How have the changing modes of media distribution affected audience agency? Due to the changing modes of distribution and the globalisation of media, audiences have been given a much greater agency. No longer is the control held by media industries, but rather by the users. This has both positive and negative connotations. Netflix is an example of a product which has revolutionised the globalisation of TV and films. Now anyone in the world can have access to major movies and shows easily at the same time. This has positive connotations as it has limited the amount of internet piracy in regards to downloading shows illegally online. It is just easier to create an account with Netflix rather than waiting for shows to download. However, there has been a lot of controversy as it is difficult to meet the separate regulations of each country due to Netflix being a global platform. This has meant that audiences have had more agency in deciding what they want to watch without the enforcement of specific Australian regulations. For example, the depiction of suicide in 13 Reasons Why would not have passed Australian regulations. Despite not infringing global standards, the show did revoke the scene showing the protagonist committing suicide for Australian audiences due to public outcry, showing the agency and control that audiences have. Music distribution has changed significantly in recent years. For years, artists relied upon major record labels to have their music distributed to audiences. Now with the easy accessible and highly popular streaming platforms available, power has returned to independent artists and many musicians are opting to release their music without record deals. The introduction of Napster was the beginning of this monumental shift. It affected the industry significantly as it provided a way for audiences to search and download MP3 files of their favourite songs with the touch of a button. Since then, the use of sites like this have improved significantly. Thus, audiences are opting to use these platforms rather than purchasing CDs as it is much more accessible. This has taken power away from record deals and given much more control to the artists. Audiences have agency and control in how music is distributed. Artists will opt to use platforms depending on what audiences are using most. Spotify has become one of the leaders in music distribution due to its popularity to wide audiences. Before the introduction of these new modes, the industry held power. Now fans and listeners have much more agency as to how they can access music due to the wide range of platforms. Social media has flipped where agency lies. Audiences now have more agency and control than they have ever had. Due to being globally connected via social media, these outlets are becoming a strong platform for activism. Messages are able to be sent much more easily around the globe. As people put so much trust in social media, they are more likely to believe the news they see and hear and become compelled to join action groups. It gives a sense of unity. An example of this is the Me Too movement. #MeToo spread very quickly through the social media and has been fundamental in the public shift in perception towards sexual violence and standing up against it. It has generated a strong feminist movement. At its heart, it shows that women all over the world should feel they have every right to call out sexual violence. Audiences have had agency in dictating how sexual violence is combated and is working to eliminate the fear around speaking out. No longer are industries able to dictate and shift how audiences react and perceive popular issues. Another example of this is the #Arab Spring movement, the first strong social media form of activism. Social media activism is so successful as it connects and engages audiences from across the globe. The uses and gratification theory shows how and why audiences use the media. It seeks to understand mass media communication. Rather than asking what the media does to audiences, it asks what audiences do to the media. This has never been as relevant as it is right now. Audience agency due to social media and the internet allows for users to gain control over media industries. It shows that audiences will choose media that satisfies their needs. It says that audiences use media for 4 reasons: diversion or entertainment, personal relationships, personal identity, and surveillance. Similarly, the media provides services which meet these purposes. This means that audiences can control and gain agency as it is the best interest of media companies to meet these standards. The Australian Classifications Board is responsible for deciding the ratings of television programs, video games, literature, and films in Australia. They have a cooperative relationship with the Australian government to ensure that all forms of media receive appropriate classifications. This ensures that audiences are aware of what is contained in the product and are protected from potentially damaging content, especially considering age of audience. With the increased agency of audiences due to the available global streaming platforms, it is becoming increasingly more difficult for the board to enforce limits around classifications and to deter audiences from gaining access to inappropriate material. An example of this is how 13 Reasons Why divided Australian audiences. The program brought up controversy around showing graphic imagery of suicide as it went against Australian regulation. Audiences maintained agency and control and gained continued access. However, the graphic scene containing the suicide was revoked due to the audience outrage. This shows how audiences actually hold more agency than the regulating bodies devoted to maintaining the safety of Australian audiences. Due to the changing modes of media distribution, audiences are gaining more agency and control to determine what they believe to be fake news. This question is whether platforms such as Facebook have an obligation to ensure their readers are well informed. The truth is that 62% of Americans alone gain their news from the internet and social media platforms. The determination of what is true and false in the news is left to the audience. Facebook, in the attempt to reduce distribution of fake news, have implemented surveys which give the audience power to vote as to whether or not they believe a news source is providing fake news. Audiences have an increasing effect on what news companies are writing about and what is being published. Ultimately, news sites want to be popular, even if this means having to narrow what they report on. The echo chamber effect, where the values or beliefs of the reader are repeated back to them via social media feeds or news applications, also plays a big role in allowing for bias and the spread of fringe values. This also prevents the news from being diverse. These new modes of media distribution are allowing audiences more agency as to what news is provided to them and what they deem to be fake news.